Fight Iczer-1 is many things. It's a mecha anime, it's a love letter to giant monster movies, a lesbian romance, a tale of cosmic horror. Iczer-1 is a bizarre amalgamation of pulp genres executed with a degree of competency that could only be born from Japan's bubble economy. And it was my gateway into the world of OVAs and inaccessible anime that inspired the work I do today and served as a touchstone for the early years of the Western anime community. Iczer-1 was a 3-episode OVA series released between 1985 and 1987, based on a manga by Aran Rei and published in the pop culture defining hentai magazine Lemon People. Along with Megazone 2-3, which was released earlier that same year, and sharing many of the same staff as Iczer-1, the financial success of these projects would lead to a boom in high-budget straight-to-video anime, defining the late 80s and early 90s era of Japanese animation. Like many anime fans of my era, the original Toonami generation, Iczer-1 wasn't something presented to me. I only discovered Iczer-1 in 2010 when the character was announced to appear in the game Super Robot Wars L, but a lot like viewers in 1985, or 1992 in the States, Iczer-1 served as my gateway into the world of strange and obscure anime, piquing my interest in titles that most fans overseas couldn't even imagine. The first thing that shocked me back in 2010 was that not only was there this really cool, slick-looking anime I had never heard of, but it had a huge underground following. I was finding these videos with tons of views and comment sections filled with English-speaking audiences saying, "This, Bubblegum Crisis and Megazone were my childhood." I actually discovered Bubblegum Crisis and Megazone through these comment sections, and it was through Megazone that I discovered Robotech. I had played Robotech Battle Cry, but I had no idea that what I was playing was based on an anime franchise. So funny enough, my pipeline of anime discovery actually went in reverse of what most people's went in. Discovering these shows completely warped my perspective on anime and the English-speaking anime community at the time. And I think the reason why is because I was discovering anime from the golden age of cell animation at a time where digital animation was just finding its footing. Even not fully understanding the time and effort that goes into cell animation, I could just tell that Iczer-1 looked good. I realized when the Gundam Hathaway movie dropped how much I valued traditional art in anime. As hyped as everyone was for that movie, I actually hated it. Partially because it doesn't have a strong enough self-contained story, but a huge part of it was the visuals. I know you can't make an anime today like you could in 1985, but still the overuse of digital effects, rotoscoping, and CGI was just too distracting for me. And my aversion to these effects is probably what kept me interested in older titles while ignoring the new stuff that was coming out. Admittedly, it wasn't very difficult when the most popular anime among my age group in fall of 2010 was "I can't believe my little sister is this cute." In January of 2011, I made a Fight Iczer-1 Abridged, and this video was how I met all of my internet friends, who I would eventually move in with around 2013, and we still live together to this day. They even helped me film things for this video. I just realized, I guess you can't see it when in what we filmed, the Pacific Rim poster.
Oh no, you can't.
Yeah. I hate when someone says a show or movie changed their life, because it always feels like manipulative hyperbole. So I'll just say, it's clear that I wasn't the only one mesmerized by this series, and I also wasn't the only person who decided to make parodies of it. Some of the earliest examples of fan content from the Western anime community were Iczer related, like Sherbert's parody dub Iczer-C.
This is an outrage! Who dares interfere with the great Sigourney?
Oh, my name is Iczer-C.
And of course, who could forget the raw banger that is Nagisa Bonita?
It's a robo dance with me. She will be your battery. Nagisa o Daisuki. Nagisa Bonita. She'll be my Iczer mate. She will stand by my side. Cthulhu and Big Gold will die. Romantic genocide.
You can argue that interest in the Iczer franchise came from anime being generally scarce in the early years of the fandom, but like I said, I discovered it in 2010, and it entranced me the same way. Someone who had been hardcore into anime since 2002, and had access to any relatively new or popular anime by way of YouTube, as long as I didn't mind watching it in 3 roughly 7-minute parts. There is something genuinely captivating about Iczer, and to better understand that, I want to talk a bit about the men who created it. The manga for Iczer-1 opens up with a girl named Nagisa who is saved from an attacker by a mysterious cat girl named Nyan. Nyan forms a bond with Nagisa, and when an alien race invades Earth, Nyan transports Nagisa into her robot, Iczer-Robo, to fight an alien pilot named Cobalt. The anime is basically the same as the manga, but the manga has more gratuitous sex scenes. The manga for Iczer-1 was created by a man named Rei Aran. Aran wasn't a famous manga author, mostly working as an assistant and submitting work to doujin groups. In 1982, a friend and fellow manga author named Aran Rei told Aran that he'd be submitting work to the magazine Lemon People, and suggested that Aran do the same. Rei Aran made his debut in Lemon People in 1982 with Fairies of the Stars, and a year later he'd publish his 2 chapters of Iczer-1. In that same year, Aran Rei would publish a manga called Gekisatsu Uchuken, or Space Punch. This manga would catch the eye of Aran Rei's college friend Toshihiro Hirano. Hirano was an established animator by that time and was finishing up work on the Super Dimension Fortress Macross TV series, and in early 1983 it was announced that Hirano and a team composed of mostly members of the Macross staff would work to adapt Space Punch into a TV anime. Unfortunately, the project fell through, but later that year Hirano would meet Rei Aran, and the two would discuss the possibility of adapting Iczer-1. Hirano didn't think a TV series would work, possibly due to the same issues that led to Space Punch not being made, but they saw potential in the new avenue of straight-to-video anime, with Mamoru Oshii's Dallos expected to make waves on its release in December of '83. And then Dallos flopped. Both Rei Aran and Hirano mutually decided to hold off adapting Iczer, but 2 years later, Megazone releases as a straight-to-video title and makes a ton of money. Hirano was the character designer on Megazone, and after its success, AIC, the company that animated most of Megazone, offered Hirano the opportunity to direct his own straight-to-video anime. Hirano, of course, would choose I already made a video covering Toshihiro Hirano's career and influences, so for the full story, I recommend checking out that video. What's important as it pertains to Iczer is that Hirano fell into animation reluctantly. He joined Toei as a part-timer in the 70s, hoping to gain some experience and make some money, but his love of robot shows eventually led him to stay on full-time. To Hirano's shock, his first project as a full-time animator was the historical anime Iczer-1, which Hirano described as an 8-month-long nightmare. The anime wasn't bad, in fact it ran for over 200 episodes. It's just that Hirano's interests were tokusatsu superheroes, giant robots, and monster movies, and Iczer-1 was none of that. In 1983, Hirano would work on the Super Dimension Fortress Macross, and despite the series being a financial and critical hit, Hirano was once again disappointed. A lack of time and budget led to several episodes having poor animation, and one episode that notoriously aired unfinished. Following the Macross TV series, Hirano worked on the film version Macross Do You Remember Love, a visually stunning film that retells the story of the TV series with 100% new animation. After Do You Remember Love, Hirano and the rest of the Macross team alongside design studio Artmech pitched a new TV series called Omega City 2-3. Unfortunately, production issues like the story being rewritten and the series struggling to find a toy sponsor led to the proposed anime series being reduced to a single anime film, and that was a film that suffered from jarring tonal switches and rampant plot holes. The success of the film was a shock to many who worked on the project, as fans seemed to overlook the structural issues, instead latching on to the characters, the music, and the animation, which are all insanely good. The film was directed by Noboru Ishiguro, director of Macross and later Legend of the Galactic Heroes, with key animation by Hideaki Anno, music by Shiro Sagisu, and of course our humble character designer. Hirano took a pessimistic approach to Iczer-1. He was excited for the project and said he had even been thinking of ideas for an anime adaptation while he was working on Megazone, but after seeing 2 of his most recent projects struggle due to studio intervention, he expected Iczer-1 to be no different. AIC wanted Iczer-1 to be a 90-minute film similar to Megazone, but Hirano opted to make it 30 minutes, that way if it turned out poorly, he wouldn't have wasted too much time. Despite having such low expectations, Hirano worked tirelessly and passionately on the 30-minute film, as can be seen in the film's credits. On the first Iczer-1 OVA, Hirano served as chief director, character designer, screenplay writer, was co-animation director, and storyboarded the entire film himself. While storyboarding, Hirano listened to a mixtape of tokusatsu soundtracks instead of the actual film soundtrack, since he expected the project to use stock music. When storyboarding was done, Hirano reluctantly placed a call to composer Chume Watanabe and requested he compose a few tracks. Watanabe is best known for his tokusatsu and anime scores on series like Hakaider and Mazinger Z, and Hirano said he had been listening to Watanabe's music on his Walkman as he storyboarded. Watanabe agreed to compose 5 songs, but when it came time to record, the two decided 5 songs wasn't enough, and Watanabe hastily threw together an entire score for the film. Hirano said he was moved to tears because he never imagined Watanabe would score a project of his. "It's really a dream come true. I've been blessed with this project," Hirano said in an interview alongside Watanabe after the film's release. Hirano's pessimism disappeared overnight, and as he continued working, more and more pieces continued falling perfectly into place. For the voice cast, Hirano discussed his ideas with Rei Aran, and they both decided that Yuriko Yamamoto would be the perfect choice for Iczer-1. Aran and Hirano had both been watching the anime Dan-Kuga, and Yamamoto's performance as the character Sarayuki fit what they wanted from a female hero. Hirano knew who'd voice Nagisa even before the project was greenlit. While working on Megazone, Hirano said he remembered hearing Mayumi Sho's screams as the character Mai, describing them as the same screams you'd hear from girls in American horror movies. With Sho's voice in mind, Hirano specifically designed Nagisa with Mai's face, and offered Sho the role, which she accepted. One of the most baffling casting choices was Kaneto Shiozawa as Sir Violet. Despite the prefix, Violet is female, and when the rest of the cast saw Shiozawa's name attached, they thought it was a misprint. Hirano said he chose Shiozawa because he was known for voicing effeminate nihilist like Leonardo Medici Bundle from Go Shogun and Bert Katze from Gatchaman. He also explained that the male voice coming from a female character would be better explained if he was given a chance to revisit the story and expand on the character's origins. The story for the OVA stays close to Rei Aran's original 2 chapters with a few variations. For one, they obviously needed to remove the sex scenes, and so in their place, Hirano added more horror elements. Hirano said he was heavily influenced by splatter films, horror movies with excessive blood and gore. Though not directly stated, the scene in which Nagisa daydreams of being attacked in her classroom may have been inspired by the film A Nightmare on Elm Street. Rei Aran said one of his biggest influences was George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and Iczer-1 has a similar tone of dread as Nagisa is forced to watch her classmates and family turn into horrible alien monsters. Nyan was renamed Iczer-1 and her cat features were changed to be more elf-like. The alien pilot Iczer-1 and Nagisa fight at the end retained the name Cobalt, but his gender was changed from male to female. This added a lesbian romance element and hinted at a backstory for the Cthulhu aliens. Hirano said he had a backstory in mind, and if the video sold well, he would explore it more deeply in a future entry. However, at this point in Hirano's career, he was known for drawing beautiful women, and was known to struggle with male characters, even pointing out himself how many of the male characters in Megazone seem like they're pulled from different series. Because of this, I think that Hirano changed the Cthulhu aliens to be female, because it was easier for him to draw, and because he likes lesbians. Iczer-1 released on video on October 19th, 1985, and like Megazone before it, the film was a hit. Unlike Megazone though, Hirano was overjoyed with the finished product, which was praised for its animation, character design, soundtrack, and especially its voice performances. Yuriko Yamamoto explained that it was easier to give a strong performance because unlike a TV anime, they were actually dubbing to the finished animation, and that gave them a good sense of who their characters were and what they were doing. Yamamoto added that dubbing the first episode of Fist of the North Star took over 8 hours, while the Iczer-1 OVA was dubbed quicker despite having a longer runtime. Following Iczer-1's completion, Hirano would work on another TV anime, Ninja Warrior Tobikage, better known by its localized name, Ninja Robots, the powers in use to protect the earth. Tobikage was another mess of a production, and Hirano considered it the last straw when it came to dealing with TV animation. Perhaps we were only able to get away with what we did by riding on the unstoppable high of Iczer. It was due to this work that I gave up on TV series production. Following Tobikage, Hirano would go almost 10 years without working on a TV anime, and during that time he would make multiple public statements voicing his disdain for the way TV animation was handled. In an interview with magazine editor Noriaki Hakaider, Hakaider would ask about the possibility of doing an Iczer-1 TV series. Hirano replied, "It's true that robot animation TV series are appealing, but I don't think it's possible to make something satisfactory with the situation and budget presented. It will inevitably end up a compromised video." When asked about future projects following Iczer, Hirano said he plans to do more straight-to-video projects, and if he can learn to appeal more to a general audience, then maybe do a theatrical film. When asked if he considered directing a TV series, he replied, "It's no good, because I know the current status of TV series. If you care about the quality of each film, you have to choose the OVA genre." With Iczer-1 being such a success, AIC greenlit a sequel, and Hirano and his team got to work on production almost immediately. Act 2 saw the Cthulhu aliens invading Earth, having defeated most of the Japanese military. Cobalt's lover Sepia seeks revenge on Iczer-1 and Nagisa, so Sir Violet pairs her up with a newly created artificial warrior, Iczer-2. Iczer-2 is the sister of Iczer-1, and Hirano explained that the character was inspired by Hakaider, the evil brother of android Hakaider from the classic 70s tokusatsu. Hirano even asked Chume Watanabe to have Iczer-2's theme open with a Western-style whistle, similar to Hakaider's theme on the Hakaider soundtrack.
やるのか？
Act 2 saw several upgrades in terms of art and design. The design for Iczer-Robo in the first OVA resembled the manga design, having a strong female form. For Act 2, Hirano brought mech designer Masami Obari onto the staff, and he asked Obari to redesign Iczer-Robo with more of a hero form in mind. Iczer-Robo, as well as the newly introduced Iczer-Sigma, would perform more agile movements, a feature that can be seen in many of Obari's robot animations. One issue that Hirano pointed out was that during the production of Act 1, the series struggled with its backgrounds. The big fight at the end of Act 1 was all done from low angles and avoided wide shots. Hirano said this was specifically to avoid showing off how spotty their backgrounds were. This is probably also why Iczer-1's fights take place in subspace, an alternate plane she can jump into with simple, undefined backgrounds. Act 2 still uses these cheats, but it never feels intrusive because of the hyper-detailed monsters, as well as the character and action animation that's honestly on par with a theatrical film. I've seen plenty of anime that remove the backgrounds during fight scenes, and it's always indicative of a production with low resources. Usually in these cases, it's not just the backgrounds they're skimping on. But I can say that for Iczer-1, they genuinely made shortcuts that let them put their resources in other, more important aspects of the project. I had actually forgotten how well done the scenes with the military fighting the aliens looked. And yeah, this scene has the Megazone problem where all the male characters look like they're from a different series. But the super realistic art style here actually makes sense because these scenes are supposed to be a play on Tsuburaya's old 50s and 60s tokusatsu films. Act 2 ends with Sepia and Iczer-2 piloting the Iczer-Sigma, about to begin their battle with Nagisa and Iczer-1 in Iczer-Robo. The cliffhanger ending was created because as soon as Act 2 was greenlit, Hirano knew he wanted the story to be a trilogy. Act 2 released on July 23, 1986, and like its predecessor was a financial success, and AIC and Hirano would immediately begin production on Act 3. There was a lot of hype going into Iczer-1 Act 3, so much so that a VHS tape called Making of Iczer-1 Daydream was released in December of '86. This VHS included interviews from the staff interspliced with cute character interactions between a cheapified Nagisa and the Cthulhu aliens. These drawings were created by animation director Narumi Kakenoichi, who appears in the interviews on the couch next to Hirano. She is also his wife. Act 3 sported a longer running time than the previous two installments at 45 minutes, though the first 5 minutes is used to recap the previous two entries, since these episodes were being released once a year. This would act as a refresher, as well as possibly draw in fans who had heard of the series through the media hype, but maybe not have seen the two previous entries for themselves. After the recap, Hirano reveals the origin of the Cthulhu. The Cthulhu were a race whose home was destroyed, forcing them to travel through space in suspended animation in search of a new home. The matriarch of the Cthulhu wishes for her race to find a new home, and upon hearing those words, the cosmic entity Big Gold appears to grant that wish. Big Gold's presence turns living things into Lovecraftian monsters, and upon taking control of the matriarch, reveals that her new form is the villain we know as Sir Violet. Act 3 saw the death of Sepia and eventually Iczer-2. In the end, Iczer-1 combines with Big Gold and uses Big Gold's wish-granting ability to return the Earth to its previous state. The final scene has Iczer-1 flying to space in search of a new home alongside the rest of the Cthulhu aliens. Iczer-1's final act sold well and satisfied fans, and the success of Iczer-1, especially the first OVA, would pave the way for future titles like Project Echo, which was also originally a pornographic title that was reworked for mainstream appeal. Iczer-1 would also be the start of a trend of unconventional mecha OVAs that were popular throughout the late 80s and early 90s, with titles like Zeorhymer, Dangaio, and Detonator Organ to name a few. These titles might not sound so important, but it's worth mentioning that over the years, fans have actually found a significant number of similarities between these shows and Evangelion, which makes sense because these shows don't fall into a strict category of real robot or super robot, instead landing somewhere in the middle. In fact, the scene where Iczer-Robo loses its arm and bleeds red blood feels just like something out of Evangelion. And it's worth mentioning that as well as being mechs, Iczer-Robo and Iczer-Sigma are also biological aliens. They also use humans like batteries, and the emotions of that human can influence the mech's power. When asked if there would be a sequel, Hirano said there couldn't be a direct sequel, but was interested in doing prequels and side stories. And Hirano would help produce Iczer entries like the prequel comic Golden Warrior Iczer-1. In 1989, the company Polydor used the Iczer license to create a drama CD called Adventure Iczer 3. This CD told the story of Iczer 3, the daughter of Iczer-1. And the popularity of these CDs, as well as Polydor's eagerness to break into the anime industry, led to them working with AIC to create an Iczer 3 OVA. Unlike Iczer-1, where the 3 episodes were released nearly a year apart, Hirano's team was only given 8 months to create 6 episodes of the Iczer 3 series. Hirano said the short production time meant he had to work recklessly, which would explain the major rises and falls in animation quality throughout. The voice acting wasn't up to par either, as the new main character, Iczer 3, was voiced by Japanese pro wrestler Cutie Suzuki. In an interview included in the Iczer 3 B Club special book, Hirano was very kind towards Suzuki and said that if she had more experience with dubbing, she could have given a great performance. However, Suzuki had never voice acted before and had trouble matching her lines to the mouth flaps of the finished animation. This led to Hirano spending a lot of extra time in the studio to help her get her lines right. Though Yuriko Yamamoto would return as Iczer-1, Mayumi Sho would not return as Nagisa, and voice actress Yuri Shiratori would take over the role. Although it is worth mentioning that this isn't the original Nagisa, it's actually her granddaughter, I still believe that if Mayumi Sho was willing and available, they would have just cast her in the part. The violence, animation, unique character and monster designs, and voice performances that made the original Iczer stand out are all absent here, and it was no wonder that the series was panned by critics and fans. Hirano acknowledged the negative response to the series, explaining that the project was made under very different circumstances, and that he hopes fans don't compare it too much to the original. After Iczer 3, Hirano would take a break from anime, but in that time, Iczer-1 would make its way overseas, with the US rendition's release of Iczer-1 on VHS. This OVA was actually fairly popular in the early days of the Western anime community, with Hirano's connections to Megazone and Macross meaning that the show was tangentially related to Robotech. US renditions dubbed all 3 episodes and released them on 2 VHS tapes in 1992, with voice actress Wendy Lee in the lead role as Iczer-1.
A mobile Kutha Wolf Ford. I'm afraid I know what this means. I may have to face Big Gold!
Lee had also done voices on Robotech, but is probably best known today for her role as Faye Valentine in Cowboy Bebop and Haruhi Suzumiya. Lee does a decent job here, especially considering the time at which this was dubbed. I've seen plenty of anime from the early 2000s with way worse performances, but even though she manages to capture the character's stoicism during heroic scenes, she struggles to capture Yuriko Yamamoto's tenderness, especially in the scenes between her and Nagisa.
Well, bye. If you get into too much trouble, then I'll come back to help.
Wait! Why have you selected me?
Because I love you.
Nagisa's voice is decent, but she sounds a bit too old to me. This isn't helped by the fact that Mayumi Sho has a naturally childlike voice, whereas Nagisa's dub voice sounds like Rose from Metal Gear Solid 2.
I know you'll fight by my side.
Wrong! Forget it!
We have no choice but to attack, Nagisa.
Nagisa, I wish that you would stop saying my name like that. What is wrong with you, huh? I don't want to fight, so let me out of here right now!
On the subject of Western releases, Iczer 3 would get an English dub by way of Manga UK, though their dub is of noticeably lower quality than the first Iczer OVA.
Leave it out, Nagisa. Stop being a hero. If you go up there again, you'll get yourself hurt even more.
This time I'll be okay. I know I will. I made a silly mistake last time.
You're saying exactly the same thing as Iczer 3 did.
Oh well, here's my opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Shit! Look what they've done. They've destroyed everything!
Wait!
What's wrong with you, Candy?
This dub is actually incredibly rare now, as it was omitted from the DVD release, which also saw the OVA retitled as Iczer Reborn, a practice that was common at the time to avoid confusion. The idea being that people would think that this is the 3rd entry in a series and avoid buying it if they couldn't find the first 2. It's the same reason KO Century Beast 3 was shortened to just KO Beast. Iczer Girls Ixalian would also get a VHS release and by a completely different company, that being ADV Films. Now you're probably wondering, what's Iczer Girls Ixalian? Well... In 1994, Hirano would direct one more Iczer OVA titled Iczer Girls Ixalian. Unlike Iczer 3, which had a futuristic setting, Ixalian brought the setting back down to Earth, with a new Nagisa discovering the alien robot Ixal. Ixal combines with Nagisa to form power armor, a concept Hirano had been trying to work into a show since the late 80s. Yuri Shiratori returned as Nagisa, though the rest of the Iczers are absent from this series. Iczer Girls Ixalion released 2 episodes in early 1994 and was panned by critics and fans, and widely considered the weakest entry in the Iczer series. Following Iczer Girls Ixalion, the closest we'd get to another Iczer entry is the 2nd season of Magic Knight Rayearth. Hirano was the chief director of Rayearth, and for season 2 he was asked to change the story so that it wouldn't spoil the manga. This led to Hirano rewriting the story and adding an original character named Nova, a villain who's very similar to Iczer 2. Nova's obsession with the main character Hikaru is also similar to Iczer-1 and Iczer 2's obsession with Nagisa. However, this season wasn't received well by fans, and the Iczer legacy would pretty much end there. When I first watched Iczer-1 in 2010, I liked it because it was weird and scary, and not like any other anime I had seen before. In the years that followed, I assumed that my reaction to Iczer was just that I hadn't been exposed to enough anime, similar to those fans in 1992. Revisiting the series 10 years later and in glorious HD, I can say with certainty that there is more to Iczer-1 than shock horror and good music. In fact, rewatching it now, I found myself catching tons of details that I didn't catch when I first saw it because I wasn't a seasoned enough anime fan. The first time I watched this, I didn't realize this was Camille and Fa from Zeta Gundam. And the series is so full of Kaneda-style animation that I'm shocked I'm not constantly seeing gifs of it posted on Sakuga blogs. The plot isn't anything high concept, but it isn't trying to be. It knows what it wants to be, and it executes it perfectly. It's a fun, well-animated action horror anime filled with references and homages to anime and tokusatsu, with a main character who is basically Space Sheriff Charavan, but as a lesbian elf girl. And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool.